One of the pillars of an economy's ability to attract talent and investment is the commitment of the local authorities in assuring the protection of intellectual property. India has to battle allegations of being lax towards respecting patents and has had to deal with repeated assertions from the US administration, in particular over the need to strengthen its laws. In 2016, the Indian government approved a new national intellectual rights policy to outline the future roadmap for IPR in India. There has been substantial progress made in the enforcement of these laws, and yet roadblocks remain.
Intellectual property infringement accounts to the loss of almost $1.7 trillion globally and loss of jobs, funding of criminals and terrorism. It is not just the fact that it is some kind of a vague technical crime. Therefore, the police needs to be sensitized. Secondly, then when you go to raid a place, always take experts so that when you make seizures via the provisions of the CRPC, you are putting your best foot forward and not caught on the wrong foot.
Among the worst affected are the pharmaceutical and FMCG sectors, and it remains pertinent for these industries to continue to press the government for additional legislative and regulatory reforms to further nip counterfeiters. India Risk Report in this episode looks at the challenges which companies face in protecting their interests and what the way forward looks like.
Hello and welcome to another episode of India Risk Report. And in this report, we are looking at intellectual property rights. And there are some broad areas which fall in the area of intellectual property rights as per the WTO, which looks at not just human intellect and the creations of the mind, but also things like copyrights, trademarks, and industrial property rights. And what we need to look at is the fact that the areas of concern internationally are the areas which relate to economies and the protection and the enforcement of intellectual property, where India remains a major cause of concern, particularly to people in the US who feel that the notorious elements in India which form a kind of black market are something that needs to be watched very carefully. And we have with us on the show Mr. Shakil Ahmed, Senior General Manager, Brand Protection for United Spirits. And we have the very informed Mr. Rohit Kocchar, Chairman and Managing Partner of Kocchar & Co., a corporate law firm. I'll go first to you, Mr. Kocchar. You feel that there are certain areas that we need to focus on in terms of trying to understand intellectual property rights, whether it is in terms of how IPR violations impact on the economy and the reputation and brands in the affected sector, or how the IPR violations also have a linkage to organized crime, which is again an area that worries the industry, and as well as certain other issues such as what could be the regulatory challenges that we need to have in place to prevent IPR violations. So it's a very long question, but I'm sure you can put us all wise.
So let me start with the last one first, regulatory challenges. In my opinion, Indian laws across the very wide spectrum of intellectual property are in very good shape. Our laws are second to none, not even to those in the Western world. We are WTO and TRIPS compliant. We're also members of the Berne Convention as far as copyright law enforcement is concerned. Having said that, there are three infirmities, legislative, in my opinion, that the Indian Parliament could look at. And strangely, I don't find any discussion on this in any of the panels that I have attended. First is that our Indian trademark and copyright laws in terms of penal provisions are extremely weak. The maximum punishment for a criminal offense, illustratively, under the Indian Trademark Act and the Copyright Act is 6 months to 3 years of imprisonment. What is really shocking is the fact that if you take the trademark law, the offences in question are actually bailable and non-cognizable, which means no police officer in any police station across the country can even entertain a complaint relating to a violation of a trademark, however serious it may be. Contrast this with the US, just as a case in point. In the US, the minimum punishment is 10 years. The offences in question are cognizable. The fine, the monetary fine provided under US law is $2 million versus less than $1,000 to a maximum of $3,000 under Indian law.
Well, you made very strong points here, and I need to sort of come back to you to just grasp it all, because there is a lot of information there. But Shakil, I want to understand from you, I think one of the pointers which anybody looking at India points at is that global research organization, foreign governments, everybody has the view that corruption in India was primarily the biggest enabler for IP theft in India. Now, again, linked with that is that there's a growing array of fake products. And that is a menace in the FMCG sector and also creates concern, particularly in a sector like pharmaceuticals, where it's not just about the monetary aspect, but lives are involved. What's your view?
Actually, much bigger than we think it is. If you recall, there was a study by Ficky Cascade which pegged the losses to the government simply on taxes as about 40,000 crores, direct losses. This was in 2015. We have in the FMCG sector suffered huge losses because of counterfeits, because of fakes, because of smuggling. This tax arbitrage as well, especially when it comes to the alcobev sector. Different states have different taxes, so that actually promotes or rather encourages smuggling between states, which again counterfeits are pushed in the garb of smuggled goods as well. Life safety is one thing that companies like ours, we take it very seriously so that our consumers get the best, the genuine products. However, coming back to your question of corruption and collusion in the environment, I think that goes without saying that it's a huge cause of concern for us. Apart from that, it is also, I think, resourcing is one of the biggest problems that we face. Given there are so many things going on in any place in India, that the police or the enforcement agencies have to pool in their resources and engage them there. So counterfeiting takes a backseat. And when you go ahead with evidence and intelligence, you find that they don't have the manpower to support you. And that's where one of the biggest problem lies.
Okay, important points, but back to you, Mr. Kocchar. Now, you were talking that our laws are second to none. But the implementation of those laws second to none also in India, because the point that comes up is that 80% of consumers buying counterfeit goods are victims of deception in India. Also, furthermore, it says that e-commerce platforms are now account for the third largest number of complaints in such cases of fraud and various other digital payments where they've been sort of palmed off all kind of shady products. Now, how does a good legal approach to it finally lead to sensible implementation?
Well, lots can be done in terms of a good legal approach, and we consistently work with our multinational clients to help them navigate the system. But the response to your main question in terms of our track record as far as enforcement and implementation is concerned, the one word answer is abysmal.
I was thinking.
And just to supplement and complement what my friend spoke, corruption is so rampant. We see this not only in the arena of enforcement of intellectual property rights, but dealing with multinationals at large. We speak about ease of doing business in India. If you're a multinational and you establish an Indian subsidiary, you'll have some very unpleasant experiences with the Indian police. But specifically in terms of implementation of IP rights, you'll find 9 out of 10 raids that you attempt or endeavor will not bear fruit, because either A, as my friend said, the police lacks in resources to help you actually implement a search and a seizure order that you may have procured from the High Court, or in 9 out of 10 cases, the counterfeiters will be alerted in advance, and all the counterfeits will be off the shelves when you actually reach there with the police party, thereby making a mockery of the entire procedure.
Right. I mean, this is a very, very important point he's raised, and I'll come back to you, Shakil, after a break, because we need to look at what can be done and what can be expected to be done in a reasonable time frame and in a reasonable way within the limited resources that we have at our disposal, because expectations are high, resources are less, so obviously there is a mismatch, but all that after a break. Welcome back. We continue to have our two experts with us looking at intellectual property rights, and I go back to Mr. Shakil Ahmed. India is the biggest market for counterfeit mafia, and this mafia has a very strong base in the country. There's another problem, that we have borders that are porous, and so there's a lot of stuff that travels to and fro. Import and export of counterfeit products is one of the key areas of these porous borders, including the fact that India is also lacks the policing resources, as you had brought out, to actually address, and I would like to educate myself, forget the resources. Is the police educated enough to understand what they can be actually doing? Because it's one thing to land up in front of some problem area, but actually to know what the law provides you with, how to conduct yourself, where you can arrest a person, where you can let a person go. So these are issues that you must have faced while managing your company's business.
Right. So I'll start with the situation that we are in now. I'm in this field of brand protection and anti-counterfeiting for the last about 8 years now. And I have seen things improve drastically when it comes to the capacity building part of, but we have a long way to go. However, there have been concerted efforts on educating the police force, customs and excise departments through industry bodies like FICCI, CII. We partner with them, the industry, private players, we partner with these industry bodies to make sure that we deliver these capacity building programs to them. Things have come up, and the senior police officials, I am very pleased to say that they are absolutely on top of it. They are aware of the laws, they are aware of the situation on the ground as well. It is percolating, but it is slow. Can we do more? I'm sure we can do a lot more, given the problem is humongous. While the FICCI pegs the losses at 1.05 lakh crores, this was in 2015. Now I think there must be a huge problem in terms of losses. So given the losses, are we investing enough money on capacity building? I think we can invest much more in resourcing. In fact, FICCI has, in fact, Capt, the CII, all these agencies have been recommending a constitution of a task force only specifically for counterfeiting.
Actually, that you really led me on to the next question. That how do you really implement or enforce IPR related laws? Do you need to look at setting up a separate force altogether? Because if you look at global figures, they are very alarming. 700 billion is the loss globally that they say could be attributed to counterfeiting, to all sorts of fraud at intellectual property rights. Our figures, though big by our economy size, globally they're about 1%. $7.8 billion of a $700 billion loss, which is happening every year. So the question is, do you feel that the current forces, the police and the intelligence agencies are overburdened? Is there room for us to look at creating a separate force? And also linked with it is the fact that the criticism that IP-intensive industries face challenges of patency problems, at the same time computer-related inventions. There are various issues that this area is new to most of us, except to those who are probably engaging actively in crime.
Right. Excellent question. I compliment you for the same, and I hope the government and the executive both are listening to you. The answer is that there is complete lack of awareness. If you look at the lower level of the echelons of the Indian police, there's complete lack of awareness, much less knowledge or expertise or specialization is a far cry. So what we really need to do, as has been done for cyber crimes as an example, we need to create special IP cells within the Indian police. And these officers manning the IP cells need to be imparted specialized training in what is intellectual property, why the protection of the brand of a company is important, how and why do breaches have dire consequences, not only for the companies in question, but for the economy in general. If you look at the National IPR Policy of June 2016, which on paper is a commendable measure, the entire focus of the National IPR Policy really is this, which is creating awareness amongst all stakeholders, and again, not only consumers who constitute the heartbeat of the FMCG business, but also the lower judiciary, and of course the police that will implement this law. So a lot has been said and dreamt of under the IPR policy. Unfortunately, in the last 1.5 years, we've seen very little traction in terms of endeavors initiated by Indian government departments to implement the letter and the spirit of that national policy.
Well, I mean, that's very clearly a hard-hitting assessment of how little has been done. But let me go back to a specific thing which relates to people like you in the industry. What is the road ahead for the FMCG sector to tackle this menace? Because anti-counterfeit operations are normally carried out by companies in a piecemeal approach. They don't, I mean, do you sit down with your counterparts at least once a month and exchange notes that you all have to have a comprehensive approach to dealing with the problem? Or you are just running off in one direction because you know what to do, and another guy is waiting for you to probably show him where the problem areas are so that he reacts to it?
Right. A perfect question again. We in the companies, we have a very robust program. We know what we are doing. We know who to tackle. We know where the counterfeit problem lies. What we do is we engage with intelligence agencies, we engage with the police. We also try and build the capacity through the industry bodies. So this is happening, but as you said, it is piecemeal. So once in a while, these things are happening. It's not a concerted effort if we look at it that way. I would really like, like Mr. Kocchar said, that there should be IP cells within the police, and we could have a one-point approach, the single window system to go and approach the police or the law enforcement, and then we can take the intelligence forward, because the companies are working in their own silos. We have intelligence, we go to the police, they carry out a raid, and the thing is closed. After that, there's no comprehensive sort of sharing of information because there is no such connection. And there is one man, like I am a one-man show in my company, there'll be other people there in other companies. So they will have limited resources, limited time. So I think the state needs to do more. The agencies need to really recognize that we have a problem, and like the national security issues are connected to this problem. Counterfeiting, the money that is being obtained from smuggling, from illicit, is being redirected into anti-national activities. This thing is not being taken seriously is what I feel. We don't allocate priority to this particular
Short
aspect.
question, Mr. Kocchar, because you're short of time. Do you think that this is already giving a blow to Mr. Modi's whole idea of doing ease of business in India?
Well, I would say that the expectations of the international business community as far as really putting this responsibility on the shoulders of Mr. Modi are not very grave, because this is not a problem created by Mr. Modi, or it's not a problem which reared its ugly head for the first time under the Modi regime. This problem has been rampant for decades. Having said that, I agree with Shakil that the current dispensation could definitely do much more and display greater leadership in sending a message to the international business community that, amongst other things, and amongst or separate from liberalizing the Indian economy and opening up the sectors to foreign direct investment,
We're also cleaning our stables.
we're also cleaning up our house as far as intellectual property enforcement is concerned.
Okay, so on that note, I have to end here, but I stand hugely educated by everything we've discussed, and thank you very much for your expertise and your wisdom. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, goodbye.